So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio.
Do you have a COVID wedding story? Perhaps you've planned a wedding, or maybe you've gotten married, and it has been a rocky year making that happen. We'd love to hear your story. The number's 1-888-914-9149. What took priority? What didn't? What was it like getting married during COVID or planning a forthcoming wedding? So I just heard the news about Tiger Woods, and I know I'm here in Southern California and I'm finding it out like 30, 35 hours late. But, you know, I really think that as someone who's been involved in physical activities and dancing and teaching Pilates, it's really hard when I hear stories about athletes. And possibly, I mean, someone like Tiger Woods, what's his ability to walk going to be? Will he be able to play golf ever again? And you really have to all of a sudden look at your life in terms of something that's defined your life or has been an instrumental part of movement and fitness and go, okay, Lord, what do you have in store for me? You may take away my livelihood. In the case of Tiger Woods, I'm sure he will be fine. But for some, a life-altering incident such as a car accident, losing your speech from a stroke, any number of injuries and illnesses, or even the loss of a family member, a child, a young child. And these things that happen that completely change the course of our lives, give us life experiences that we never even would have imagined. And here Tiger Woods is, who knows what his recovery will look like. He has fractures to both upper and lower portions of his tibia, the fibula, and his right leg, as well as damage to ankle bones and trauma to the muscles and soft tissue of the leg. Some of that, I'm sure, will not be repairable. Other parts of it, who knows what that recovery will look like. Possibly great for someone who's been very athletic his entire life. But it really made me think of St. Joseph. And Wednesdays, we try to talk about St. Joseph. It's the year of St. Joseph, as Pope Francis has declared. And Wednesday, the church offers us throughout the week different themes throughout the week. For example, Wednesday is opportunity to really focus on St. Joseph. Thursday, we have the Eucharist. Friday, we remember the suffering of our Lord Jesus Christ, his passion. Saturday is Our Lady. Sunday is the resurrection. So Wednesday, there's this opportunity for fasting that the church used to stand by on Wednesdays very intensely. And then St. Joseph. And I think of St. Joseph in context of Tiger Woods or any of us who have gone through a difficult transition. The fact that maybe he won't walk again. What happens when our livelihood is pulled out from underneath us? When our capacity for speech or some of our senses is removed? You know, I really think of St. Joseph in these moments, that he was a man who knew how to adapt. He suddenly finds out that his wife, betrothed, right, is pregnant by the Holy Spirit. First, he doesn't know what happened, and then he adapts. The Holy Spirit, working through the angels, comes to him, the angel Gabriel, and shares with him the Blessed Virgin Mary is conceived by the Holy Spirit. Okay, so he keeps Mary and doesn't get rid of her. Well, what next? Well, all of a sudden, he has to flee to Egypt after another dream from an angel, and he has a newborn and a mother in a fragile state right after having given birth. And all these different things, St. Joseph knows how to adapt, even when his livelihood of where he lives, where he's connected to, where his business is, where his work is stripped out from under him. Even when he has to travel in very dangerous circumstances with a very vulnerable baby and wife, he adapts. And he has to live a number of years in Egypt. He adapts. And so what does St. Joseph remind us as I'm thinking about Tiger Woods? That real men and women, but real men adapt to their circumstances. They don't let anxiety and depression overcome them in the face of difficulties, in the face of losing something you've completely loved. And I can tell you it was challenging for me when I stopped dancing. You know, a part of what you define yourself at is suddenly pulled out from under you. But here's the challenge. When we begin to define ourselves based on things that we do, such as playing golf, such as being a good parent and then suddenly losing a child, such as being laid off after you had a job that was providing an income for your family, what do we do we're called to adapt and thank the Lord for the challenges he presents to us. And I think this is so prevalent in the middle of Lent when, oh my goodness, the Lord knows how to allow suffering and temptation in difficult circumstances to come your way. So often people say, wow, it is definitely Lent because things are happening that can be earth-shattering, life-shaking. It happens. And so it's important to really kind of keep that perspective in mind as we continue to journey through Lent with St. Joseph, especially on Wednesday. If you're just joining me, you're listening to Trending with Timmerie. Perhaps you're listening on the Relevant Radio app. I hope you, if you aren't already, that you've downloaded the Relevant Radio app and that you share this show with a friend. You can always head over to relevantradio.com/trending to ask your question. We put a question box up on Instagram. Is it important to compliment your significant other in public? And how do you compliment your significant other to other people? I had an experience not long into marriage where I learned this, and ladies, maybe you've had a similar experience. I have stuck my foot in it so many times, and it really caused friction for myself and my husband at different moments, just by, for example, telling an embarrassing story in public that, wasn't the worst thing, but didn't necessarily, make him feel good or build him up. And it was interesting because I was written to recently by a man who heard one of his friends talking about her boyfriend. And she made this comment of, yeah, he's a good boyfriend. And this listener wrote and said, is that okay to say? Like, to just kind of have this response like, yeah, he's a good boyfriend. It kind of sounded like, good job, Bucky the dog. Great job. You're doing a great job. It's almost like a condescending pat on the back. And I thought it was really interesting that another man picked up on this when a woman said about her boyfriend, yeah, he's a good boyfriend. Should she have complimented him more? Should she have said more? I really related it to my own experience. And here's what I realized. I was really bad at giving public compliments to my husband. It's something I still really have to work on. And there's certain things that I would never think of are the exact opposite of a compliment. I have to work on not doing, like telling super embarrassing stories in front of certain people, most people, in fact. And this is, I'll never forget, I was reading a book by Shanti Feldhahn and her husband, and the book is titled For Women Only, What You Need to Know About the Inner Lives of Men. And one of the main chapters has to do with respect. Showing respect, and how when we tell funny stories or even we contradict our spouse in public, it makes them feel really disrespected and kind of feel like a loser and kind of publicly, not kind of, actually humiliated. And ladies, I just didn't get this. And we kind of live in a culture where we're all about progress. And that progress culture kind of tells us that we should nitpick at everything that isn't perfect. And if you're a perfectionist and if you're type A, oh, good luck. I understand it is so hard. So like, husbands, help us here, because it's not easy when this is what the culture trains us to do, to just laugh our way along in the world. We laugh at things when we socialize. The LOL is one of the most common text phrases that we still send, because in awkward or uncomfortable situations, when we don't know how to bond with people, we gossip, we make fun of people, we tell funny stories. And while it might be funny to us, it isn't necessarily funny to the people it humiliates, even if we think we ourselves are involved. And one of the things that really, really struck me, and I want to get Lucas's thoughts on this and Karen's. Karen and Lucas are here. They're our producers working just all the time behind the scenes. You don't hear a lot from them, but Lucas is on the soundboard, Lucas Holt and Karen Moran. And we've got wisdom and new marriages circling here. What has your experience been, Karen, in I don't know how many years of marriage now, of 30. Complimenting your spouse? 30 years? Oh my gosh.
That seems unreal, but yes, 30. No, I understand exactly what you're saying, Timmerie, and I don't want to, I just want to say give yourself some grace, because you're constantly learning the sensitivities of your spouse. And that's the last thing you want to do, is to make them feel sad or embarrassed or undermine them in any way. But you're right, we're in a culture, especially as women, that's sort of like encouraged us to pull apart men, and that's just so hard to unlearn, and it takes time, but give yourself grace. I'm sure you're being more hard on yourself than you need to be, But if someone's not being hard on themselves about it, maybe it's a good reminder, how does this make that person feel? And men will probably never say, this makes me feel embarrassed. Most men don't talk, are not comfortable talking about how they feel. Maybe they just go straight to being mad. And I've always learned that when someone is mad, it's usually because there's a hurt feeling underneath it.
Right.
They don't want to express that. So
one of the things that stood out to me in Shanti Feldhahn's book is that anger in men usually means that they feel disrespected.
Yeah, there's like a hurt feeling.
And I think that's so profound. And Lucas, you're recently married. You're coming up on a year and a couple months here. You had a COVID wedding as well. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But, have you noticed where you're like all of a sudden angry and like maybe uncontrollably angry for a moment and you don't quite get why, and it takes a while to get to the heart of it, and perhaps it has something to do with this respect and verbal affirmation thing?
Yes, definitely. So for me, I am a words of affirmation person. And that's one of my top love languages. And so if my wife compliments me or something like that, or even just leaves me a note, that's like a huge kind of boost of confidence for me. Like, okay, I'm doing something right. Now when the opposite happens and she criticizes me of something, then I take it in the extreme opposite direction. So it's like, oh, I did something terrible. Now I need to make up for it or something. So I don't handle it super well. And then I will, as Karen was saying, I won't say anything that I'm mad. I'll just let it simmer there, and then I'm like, wait, why am I so upset right now?
So do you give the silent treatment? Almost, not quite, maybe a little.
A little bit.
Boy, the silent treatment is the worst.
She's like, why haven't you said anything in the last 5 minutes? I'm like, I can't. I'm just thinking.
This is really good because you mentioned the 5 love languages, and verbal affirmation is one of them. And if you've never looked at the 5 love languages, they're really profound. I mean, we have, all of us, ways that we show love and receive love. And it might not be the same. I might be someone who, let's say I'm a gift giver and I'm constantly giving gifts, but let's say I'm trying to give my husband gifts, but that's not what makes him feel really good and built up. Say his love language is verbal affirmation, like you just said, Lucas. And the beginning years of marriage was so difficult because I had a criticism for the way the dishes were done, the way the window was open, what the temperature was. And for someone who perhaps that's a verbal affirmation, or even if it isn't, that constantly seems like, man, I just can't do anything right. And I feel like I'm hearing that I'm a terrible person. And that's really difficult.
Yeah. And it's it's hard to, especially I think in a new relationship when you're still trying to figure out each other's communication styles and how they receive love. And that's obviously such an important thing. And I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts because, Timur, you've been married a little bit longer than I have, and Karen, you have a lot more marriage experience.
I always have to say,
as you continue to grow, the difference between when you first got married versus now, is it a gradual thing, or is it more it's kind of stayed the same the entire time?
Oh man, I'm going to just jump right in here and say, I'm no expert, but one thing I have learned in 30 years is every stage of your marriage, it's constantly changing, and you constantly have to give and take and flow. And even now, in this stage of my life and our marriage, we're empty nesters, and Ralph is retired, and so and I'm working still, and so everything is just communication. And I'm not the best at hey, I work in communications. I'm not the best at communicating. So
isn't that kind of the thing where if you're a painter,
classic.
You're bad at painting your house? You're a communicator, you're bad at communicating?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what we all three have in common here is that we're committed in our marriage, and that really makes a difference. And I know you've had Leila Miller on before, and she talked about the impact of divorce. And my parents were divorced when I was 9 years old. And I can see over the 30 years that I've been, and Ralph's parents were always married until his father passed away, sadly. But I've seen his perspective of marriage really buoy my insecurities about marriage and the commitment that stays there lasting. And so he's almost had to have double the strength than just to compensate for my I'm sure in 5 years, I'm sure it's ending. but it's 30 years. He's real, we really are hanging in there. And I think it's the sticking to it and just working it out. And, as you learn and you grow, and, here we are this far in. Wow, this is sanctifying us? Oh no, wait, we're going to catch up, so.
And listening. I can imagine listening after 30 years, that you become a good listener, or at least you'd hope that you have, right?
Yes. You hope that you have. And like I said, I feel like we're constantly just really trying to adapt and communicate, from raising, from being alone without children, then we had children and raising children and being a team in that and getting them through college and having them adult, and now being on our own without children. Yeah, there's such an array of experiences that commitment has been a constant, no matter what. Good communication, bad communication, commitment is the constant. And, so I think we all
love
have
that.
in
Commitment
common.
is the constant. And I think that that's a profound line. Commitment is the constant, because isn't that what we're called to in a covenantal marriage, the sacrament of matrimony, that fidelity that is so present that the culture doesn't stand by. I was looking at Kim Kardashian and Kanye West, and they publicly have announced they're filing for a divorce. Supposedly everything's very amicable for the two of them. They've decided to quote unquote co-parent. But I think it's so interesting that people are saying, oh, wow, they're totally okay with co-parenting. Well, when you get married, a lot of people think, we'll see how long this lasts. But when you have kids, you're tied into that commitment of either you can abandon your children or there has to be some level, even if you divorce, of co-parenting. And that commitment has to be present, even if the so-called bond of marriage is abandoned or broken.
Yeah. I want to say to all these young people that are, giving up or co-parenting, I want to say, read Layla Miller's work. Make it work.
Yes.
Make it work. It's not easier, the long term. But, I understand in my own parents' case that was definitely, it had to happen. And, those are more complicated stories. But honestly, the aftermath, everyone can heal. Everything is healable too. But yeah, it really give 110% to your marriage. You won't regret it, So.
And St. Paul had it right. He gives this tall order to wives and husbands. Wives, obey your husbands. And we talk about the word obey. We could talk about respect and be a compliment to your husband, because God knew and was working through the Holy Spirit, St. Paul in Ephesians chapter 5, that compliment, that respect was going to be difficult for women to show toward their husbands because of the fall. And then similarly, husbands, love your wives. So show that love to your wives, because that was going to be difficult for husbands to show to their wives. And so that idea of respect for women is so important, and that comes out in verbal affirmation. And so I hit a wall where I went, I don't think I know how to compliment, at the time, my boyfriend, and then getting married, my spouse now in public. It was one thing I was noticing when I was dating, that it was complimenting face to face to him, but then in marriage, complimenting in public. And so I literally had to go, let's start simple, because I'm a dummy at this. I'm going to start writing down a list of compliments, because I need to see and practice verbalizing it. I had to train my mind to think in a different way of affirming, rather than maybe very quickly focusing on how this other person can serve me or do something better, and instead be grateful for what I had.
A compliment sometimes I think we get possessive of what we, of the good things in our life, but a compliment never takes anything away from you. It serves to build someone else, and that it makes your relationship grow. It's like a vulnerable way of giving to someone else. So, but yeah, a compliment never takes away, but always builds up. So I don't know. that kind of.
We're adding to the conversation here. We're doing some strip down here at Relevant Radio. Our team's taking off their masks to join the conversation. Maybe you'd like to join the conversation. The number's 1-888-914-9149, or you can head over to my Instagram story. Perhaps you want to share a story about a COVID wedding planning. What has it been like? We have to go to a break here in just a second, but we have a call from Mike from Milwaukee. Mike, share with us, really interesting, your brother-in-law asked you to help pay for a ring. Share with me a little bit more.
Hey, Timmery. Actually, it's my not my brother-in-law, my actual brother, but he showed me the ring, and I was like, oh, cool. But then he said, I need help paying for it. And I'm like, what? And I said, how much? I forgot the exact number, but it was in the 4 digits. And I was like, why? Oh, no, I didn't say why, but I thought in my head, why? Thankfully, the conversation just ended. And he still hasn't popped the question yet, but still, I'm like in shock. I mean, what do you guys think about that? If he's going to get married, he should have the money.
Okay, Mike, I want to come back on this because, first of all, I want to know if you were willing to pitch in what you did in that moment. You said the conversation ended quickly, but what would you do? You can write to us on Instagram, call and let us know. Your brother asks you to help pay for his soon-to-be fiance's ring. Should he be even getting married if he can't afford it? Or, I don't know, we group engaging in polygamy? I don't know what's happening here. We'll be right back here on Trending with Timmery. Don't go away. We'll be talking about so much more, including ditching the I talked about and how saints really do travel in packs. We'll be right back.
We're talking about what you're thinking about. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
So Kim Kardashian and Kanye West are splitting up, and we're talking about complimenting each other in public and how when we don't compliment our spouses in public, significant others, it can go really wrong, even if you just tell a funny story. And you know, it's fascinating to me because we have a call, and we'll get to in just a moment, about the impact of a marriage falling apart because of this confusion in terms of how to talk about your spouse publicly. But I asked the question a minute ago. Mike from Milwaukee's on the line. And what would you do? Your brother has asked you to help pay for the ring for him to propose to your future sister-in-law. That is, if she says yes. Mike, what did you do when your brother asked you to help pay for the ring and he was asking for 4 digits out of your pocket?
I just left it be. I said I'll think about it, and that's been the last couple of months. I've not brought it up, and I'm just waiting for him to say something. Pretty much.
Okay, did you know that rings were 4 digits? I'm just asking because I know a lot of dudes don't know that. I was just talking to a family member about this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you knew the price of rings. You just were a little shocked by being asked to participate in that for a sister-in-law. Okay, so
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so then this brings to mind the question. I think this ties into the whole COVID wedding situation. You know, people are planning weddings, budgets are changing, bigger, smaller, adapting. But how much do you spend on a wedding? And what do you do, for example, in this instance? Do you say something if a family or friend can't afford the ring? Do you say, you know, buy a less expensive ring? Do you start asking the question, should you be popping the question or getting married at all? I don't know. Lucas, Karen, what do you guys think?
Well, Lucas, you got married right at the beginning of the pandemic when it was opening up. How did you handle it? I'm inspired by the way you did it anyway. So,
well, I will say that definitely for sure the costs were down because not very many people could attend. But as far as a wedding ring,
don't sound so happy about that, Lucas.
Yeah, it's like it's a house. Some people are spending money they could put toward a house. You know.
Yeah, but
yeah, it's true.
When it comes to the ring situation, honestly, I don't think I could, in good conscience, like If it was an actual like bad situation, I would do what I can to help out. But if it was just like, hey, can you help me out, bro? I'd probably be like, dude, you might need to think twice about getting married if you're gonna like. I don't know.
Hold on, stop trying to sound so nice. Oh, if it was a bad situation, I'm helping out. What bad situation surrounding getting married? I don't know. Maybe if someone's, pregnant. I almost said knocked up. I don't know. Can I say that on Catholic radio? So if someone's pregnant, maybe that's the bad, challenging situation. But still, you're trying to give the nice answer there.
I am. I don't know. There's a part of me that would like, I want to help you out. You're my brother, but at the same time, it's like, man, if this is an issue, like maybe you should think twice about proposing at this moment, you know?
It's a big step. Don't start out in debt.
Right.
So maybe their spot should have been Mike. Maybe their spot should have been Mike from Milwaukee. Mike, maybe you should ask your brother, is she pregnant? Like, do we need to get this happening now? But then that makes it more awkward.
I hope not. I mean, I don't know. That would be a really weird question. Yeah.
What's the rush? What's the rush? Or, they have
this is when
payment plans
she's been dating
at the
for 3
ring
years.
stores.
Dave Ramsey, this is a really good time to encourage people to lock into a program of planning finances because, maybe you will do your brother a favor by encouraging him to go through questions and conversations that should be really maybe started to occur if you're thinking about marriage. What do your finances look like? What do you have in terms of your assets, your debts, and so forth? What's your attitude about money? It would be the hope that the first time you talk about these things wouldn't just be in marriage prep. And that is a part of the Catholic marriage prep is, are you on the same page with regard to finances? So it might be worth conversation. Say, hey, you remember that time when you asked me to help pay for the engagement ring? How are things going? Have you, are you still thinking about proposing? I think that would be helpful to shift the conversation. Is there a crisis? Yes or no? AKA baby, COVID surprise. You never know. They happen. They happen to me, and then to talk about finances. Thanks for calling, Mike. We have another call that came in. We're talking about complimenting spouses in public. Sally in Clinton, Ohio. What was your experience where you found that a lack of compliments really caused a problem?
Well, I'm actually in Clinton, Iowa, but that's okay because people from Ohio and Iowa, we're the same state. We just have a few different letters.
Yep, that was my bad.
No problem. And I just hit 30 years too, Karen, so congratulations.
Yay.
We had some very dear friends. Had some very dear friends that we met very early on in our marriage, and I love them both dearly, but she would correct, and I'm a very strong personality, so I don't believe in being mousy. It's not that at all. But she would correct and criticize him constantly. And I could literally see him wilt practically. And I'd say, oh, come on, oh, don't pick on him. We would actually kind of take his side, but it really went on and on and on. And eventually, he had an affair. And it ended their marriage. And even though I don't, I'm not saying that what he did was okay at all, but it was understandable. He probably found someone who did build him up, who did listen to him.
Mm-hmm.
And,
it shows how important that is.
Yeah. And it was so sad. We were godparents to their children. And I'm like, lighten up, because there's an old expression, death by 1,000 cuts. And that's kind of what we witnessed. And it really was heartbreaking. And we tried, to kind of intervene a bit, but it was just very, very sad. And so, yeah.
And Sally, this is a good reminder for me because there have been moments where, maybe you're having a conversation and it's a simple detail and you correct your spouse, you're among friends, you think it's not a big deal. But if you do that over and over again, it can make someone feel lousy. And I was actually with some friends recently, and there is a story. They were driving over a bridge in Washington, and the wife was sharing and so this is in the opposite direction, some really cool facts. She was all proud of herself, sharing these facts about this area she's recently moved to and about the bridge. And all of a sudden, the husband one-upped her and gave like 2 really impressive facts about the bridge there in Seattle. And she was like really proud of herself to actually have some like local Newtown news to tell to her visitors that were in town. And, her feelings were kind of hurt. She's like, geez, well, thanks for that. And so it's done in the opposite direction. But sometimes we don't think about, not that we have to like have these build up moments for other people and have them be the superstar. I know some people think that that's what a compliment is, that you have to like really pamper the ego. It's the simple little things of being thoughtful. And even just how we phrase things like, wow, that's really cool, but did you know? Or, kind of adjusting and shifting how we communicate, because communication can be so impactful for good or for bad. And Sally, in this case, just that example of that correction and that constant correction, it can really wear away at one person, the spouse. And it's not just women correcting husbands. It goes both ways all the time in many marriages. And I think that's important for us to remember. And I was just sharing because I know it's something that I've had to work on and have struggled with. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. Thanks for joining the conversation today. I want to hear your thoughts on COVID weddings. What has it been like to plan? Karen, you and I were talking recently about, and if you're just listening, Karen Moran is one of our producers here working behind the scenes for Trending. And she was talking about how her daughter recently was at a COVID wedding and just the approach. What was that
She went to actually 2 different COVID weddings. I wanted to let you know about this other one. So there were 2 that she went to of friends, one from high school and one just from who was a little older than her from high school and from our church community back in Northern California. One was very subdued and outdoor and very, very conscious of all the regulations, and the other, I think it went well, but it was definitely sort of later in the pandemic, so it almost seemed like a regular giant wedding, with very fancy and a lot of people and a lot of expense. And one of the concerns my daughter was raising was, sort of being new to the rodeo of marriages and weddings, is like, how much is the maid of honor expected to pay for the wedding? And so we were having a great big discussion with an aunt who was in town last weekend. the older moms were sort of saying, well, wait a minute, what? And so
why
apparently
is the maid of honor paying for the wedding?
It just seemed like she wanted to make things really nice for her sister, and went really into it and overboard, and so of course my daughter was sensitive to that. Probably not wanting to have to do that for her sister eventually.
But this comes back to the question of like, not that weddings are all about dollars and cents, but the money question.
Enough?
I mean, how much is enough? But also, you feel bad when a bride picks out, let's say, a specific dress that is like $300, let's say, and expects all the bridesmaids to pick it up, and you wear it one time, and of course you keep it in your closet for forever because it's a ball gown, and we all want to be princesses, right? And you spent $300 on it. I mean, I think I still have my prom dress, to be frank. I mean, it's beautiful. I don't think it's $300, but still. And so, like, where is the boundary, even with saying yes to being in a wedding, or saying, hey, I can't afford this?
Yeah.
Or, what you expect of yourself. And I think this comes back to love languages. And are you a gift giver? Like, what do you expect, and what does the other person expect in terms of the relationship and the responsibilities? And it comes down to communication, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I think every bride is ultimately going to do it their way. But what I really like and appreciate about Lucas's experience that he shared way back almost a year ago, Lucas.
Yeah, May, right, Lucas?
Yeah, May 1st.
You weren't a June bride. You were a May groom.
Right.
A May groom. It just sounded so particularly appropriate to the sacrament. And 30 years ago, yes, we had a big 80s wedding, it was like a big 80s It was, even though it was 1990,
The hair,
we were still at the
the
end of the big. We had some bangs, we had some hair, we had some pink, we had some poof. But, like, I'm just so impressed with young people today who would do something like what Lucas did and place the importance on the sacrament. That's really
For
great.
those who maybe didn't hear your story, Lucas, you had a Zoom wedding, essentially. No party. Your families weren't there. Who was there? What was it like?
Right. Yeah, so I got married on May 1st, Feast of St. Joseph the Worker. St. Joseph, today's Wednesday. All right. Yeah, it was really, really simple. So we had 10 people there, and it was not what we had planned at all. My wife is originally from Florida. That's where all of her family is. We were planning on going down there to have our wedding, and then once COVID hit, this was still when things were really new and we were trying to figure out what to do. We knew that God was calling us to get married, and with a lot of discernment, a lot of prayer, we decided to get married when we did. It was honestly so nice. I can't even tell you how much it meant to me that, it was, a lot of our family was over Zoom, but they were there in spirit watching the sacrament happen. And for me especially, my family is not Catholic, so it's actually kind of funny. A lot of them mentioned to me later, that was the longest wedding I've ever seen in my life. But I'm like, this is a great opportunity.
We know how to
witness.
do it.
Yeah, I'm like, well, it was a mass. And they're like, well, what's a mass? And then so like I get to tell them. So it's like a cool evangelizing opportunity and really directing them to like this is ultimately what the sacrament of matrimony is all about. It's about, foreshadowing the union of Christ with his church, and this is what was happening when we were doing this during the consecration of the bread and wine. And so that's
really cool.
I
just think that's so special. I mean, I'm in awe of all. I have never met your wife, but I think what a wonderful woman she must be to, forego the big wedding, the big, all of that. And
celebration.
It's like that's a really mature decision. So
yeah.
And maybe you're listening and you are planning a COVID wedding. You are for family member, or maybe you're getting married and you're thinking about postponing your wedding. We'd love to hear from you. Why are you thinking about postponing? Why do you feel like you should wait for the party? Let us know. We'd love to talk about this more because I know it's been challenging finding both celebration and the sacrament as important parts of 2021 and even looking into 2022 in the face of COVID. You're listening to Trending with Timmery. I'll be back to discuss why ditching the mirror and the scale can help you whether you're bulking, losing weight, or struggling with body image. We'll be right back. Catholic Order of Foresters is proud to sponsor the Relevant Radio Studio line. For information about employment opportunities and flexible premium life insurance plans, visit relevantradio.com/Forester.
Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
Okay, here are a couple of things that I want to talk about surrounding the mirror and the scale. So a number of years ago, I decided to give up the mirror for Lent. And so I actually put like what's the thing that you put on your bed? A sheet over the mirror. And then I had like one side mirror. I'd use it to get ready, do my hair, do my makeup, and that's it. And here's part of the reason why, because so many of us women can struggle with body image, weight, and it's not just women. Men struggle with body image too, with weight gain, the fluctuations that occur, but especially with that desire for a lot of men when they're trying to bulk, for example, and that obsession that can occur with certain parts of your body that you're trying to build and work on. And so I think that this is applicable for both people, ditching the mirror and the scale. And here's the deal. So I went through Lent, I totally ditched the mirror, covered it up. And part of the reason why is I notice a lot of women, like we have mirrors around and we seek them out, but we also, anytime there's a glance of our reflection, it's so easy for us to like stare down, be fixing and be insecure and be like looking at any opportunity we can to either fix or self-criticize. And I'm not saying looking in the mirror is a bad thing, but we have FaceTime, we have selfies, we have photos. I mean, people do their makeup with their cell phone camera now, flipped back and reverse. We have so much of self reflection occurring. And if you think about it, 100 years ago, it would be a special thing to have a mirror in your home. And not only that, you would see your reflection in perhaps a piece of glass or in the water. We were a little more in tune, or should I say comfortable with our bodies before. Now it's so easy for us to criticize and critique and constantly be looking at that number on the scale. And so here's the deal. You want to ditch the mirror, cover it, avoid it, humble yourself and let go of looking even in the windows and get ready in it only and move along. Fix what you need to in the middle of the day. Be aware. And I'm sure I had a handful of outfits that really didn't match at times. This could have happened, I'm sure. I've gone through those phases where you're mixing polka dots and stripes, total faux pas. I'm sure I had some wild days. You got to work through learning what your fashion styles are. But here's the thing with the scale. So I've put kind of a funny story. So I don't really weigh myself, and I actually didn't weigh myself when I was pregnant. And I was 9 months pregnant talking to my younger sister who's 18. And part of the reason why I don't weigh myself is I just don't want to get worked up in my head about a number that can fluctuate so easily, even just from stress, water weight. I've always taken the approach, how do my clothes feel and fit? What is realistic for my body? Am I exercising enough? And I pay attention based on that because it was so easy for me to focus on a number. So I think I got rid of my scale close to 7 or 8 years ago. So I'm pregnant and I chose not to weigh myself. And part of me kind of wondered, am I being ridiculous? Or I just not want to see the number? But I thought, well, I'm healthy. Why do I need to think about it? And so I told my sister this, she's 18, and I'm not kidding you, I'm 9 months pregnant, and she was trying to roll me onto the scale like an award-winning hog on its way to the county fair. She really wanted to know how much I weighed, and it was so funny. She's like, I just want to know. And she cracked me. She's like, I want to know how fat you are. Come on, get on the scale. And I'm like, no, I'm running out of the bathroom from her. But I finally did weigh myself a few days ago because it was a point where I thought, this is helpful to have a goal, but to not obsess over it, to have a baseline understanding where I'm at. I've gotten a little ways away from having had the baby, starting to get back into exercising. But here's the thing that has been important for me. You can always find a scale at someone else's house, at the gym. There's always a scale available. And I really advise when I work with my clients in Pilates, because I'm a Pilates trainer dealing with people who have gone through injuries and have gained weight because of injuries, surgeries, and who have gained and lost weight because of surgeries. And I've seen that it's important to, sure, weigh yourself, but not to obsess. And so maybe setting that goal of weighing yourself on the first of each month and letting that be your goal and your opportunity to check in and see where you're at. Give yourself those 4 weeks, or maybe it's 2 weeks if you really need more feedback. But for me, it's been really helpful to have that feedback without having the obsession, whether it be the mirror or the scale, so that I could really continue to grow in my comfort in my own body, my self-image. And again, you don't have to be trying to lose weight, bulk up, or really address body image issues. It can be an opportunity to let go of the pressure that the culture builds surrounding how we look and how we perceive ourselves. And I think that letting go of the scale and the mirror a little bit, letting go of looking in those glass windows when we have the opportunity, are also a reminder for us to stop looking at those images online and comparing ourselves. Or comparing ourselves to our old selves. And I'm learning, a woman's body really changes when you're pregnant, and you have to be patient with yourself. And coming from the fitness world, it's something that I've really, wanted to be good at being aware of my body, but not, overdoing it. There's also the flip side of where you're obsessing from the perspective of fitness and you're overdoing it. You choose slothfulness because you give up. You feel like you can never make a change. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. Perhaps you've struggled with body image issues, or you're trying to make some gains. What has it been like for you? Let us know. You can reach out to us at relevantradio.com/trending, or you can also download your podcast and share it with others. So yesterday was the feast day of Saint Polycarp. Now, if you don't know who St. Polycarp is, he's known as one of the apostolic fathers, which means he was an immediate follower of one of the 12 apostles. So guess which one he was a follower of? St. John. It was his feast day yesterday, February 23rd. And I didn't have the opportunity to talk about him, but I wanted to because there's a theme that someone said to me a number of years ago, and I heard in a homily, and it's this: saints travel in packs. And I'll say it again: saints travel in packs. And this is so true because I'm going to kind of point out some examples. So St. John knew St. Polycarp. He was one of his followers. And people say this phrase all the time: it's not what you know, but who you know. I think that this phrase really rings true when it comes to the saints. For example, we already know that St. Polycarp was an apostle of St. John, but he also instructed St. Irenaeus. So St. Irenaeus was just one removed from the apostle John and two removed from our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, Polycarp even traveled all the way to Rome at one point to meet Pope St. Anicetus, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. So here's another saint he knew, a Pope saint this time. He traveled far in order to meet him in Rome. Another example, St. Polycarp knew another saint. Here's a fourth saint. He kissed the chains of, listen to this, St. Ignatius, the Bishop of Antioch, as St. Ignatius was on his way to being martyred, and he was passing through Smyrna. And so St. Polycarp was actually able to kiss those chains that bound St. Ignatius. And in fact, there's a real letter that we can read. We'll post a link to it in the show notes. You can find them at relevantradio.com/trending, where St. Ignatius wrote this letter to Polycarp. And I want to talk about just a few of the lines from that letter, because when I think about this theme of saints traveling in packs, one thing that saints did really well, one thing that the early church did really well, is they encouraged one another in the faith. And as we've been talking today about verbal affirmation and learning to compliment your spouse in public and learning how to just build up your spouse by giving them a good compliment, or even the person you're dating, why wait till you're married? Start working on it now. I wish I had worked on it more before I was married. It would have saved a whole lot of headache that occurred after we got married. If we can build up each other now in the church, we will become better communicators. We will become better sources of mentorship. That call yesterday that we had, someone who left the church, and they were talking about how they didn't feel welcomed and how they found mentorship and guidance when they went to a Lutheran church. That's true. Sometimes we're not good at just using our speech to invite other people in and create a welcoming and warm environment with our own language and our body language. So listen to some of these words from St. Ignatius' letter to Polycarp today. He said, "Be watchful, possessing a sleepless spirit." And I thought that this was a good thing. So he's encouraging, do something good, be watchful. Don't be sleepy, don't be lazy. And this reminds me of 1 Peter 5, where our first pope said, "Be sober and alert, your opponent, the devil, is prowling around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour." If we are getting enough rest, if we are taking care of ourselves, if we're alert and aware, both in terms of physical alertness and spiritual alertness, there's going to be a better sense of holiness and connection to God. Another thing that Ignatius said to Polycarp is, "Speak to every man separately as God enables you." I thought this was a really profound line that I want to just unpack a little bit. In the world of social media, text messaging, it's so easy to send a group text message, to post something and expect everyone to kind of be filled in on your latest update. And it's hard. I'm moving to the Midwest right now, and I would love to tell everyone personally that I had a baby, send everyone personally a photo, tell everyone personally that I'm moving, and say goodbye personally, everyone. We can't expect perfection from ourselves. Encouragement from the early saints, St. Ignatius to Polycarp, I think is really important, that evangelization is personal, that God will enable us to engage in the conversations and relationships that we are meant to engage in. willing to go in and have those conversations, to build those relationships, and to be alert in them. As St. Ignatius said, don't be sleepy in the spirit. Be alert. Be prayerful. That contemplative spirit of prayer. You've been listening to Trending with Timmerie. I hope you go back and listen to Sister Tina Alfieri's podcast. We're going to post a link to it now, where we talk about working through Lent and those various struggles we have with temptation.